Hi. In this short Bible bite, I want to talk about how God has fulfilled his promise to Abraham to bless all the people of this earth through Jesus. That is, to all who believe or live by faith in him, whether Jew or Gentile. So that not only will this teaching be a Bible bite, but it will also serve as evidence for the faith as well. In that, to begin with, for all who may not be familiar with the story of Abraham, in Genesis chapter 12 and verses 2 through 3 in the Old Testament, God blessed him by promising him there. He told him, I will make you a great nation, and I will make your name great. And so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you. And the one who curses you, I will curse. And in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. And in regard to how that promise would be fulfilled, in Genesis chapter 15, verses 4 through 5, God told Abraham there that he would have an heir from his own body. That is, through him and through his wife Sarah, so that Isaac would be what? Isaac would become a son of promise. And then according to Genesis chapter 21, verses 1 through 5, God delivered on his promise by allowing Sarah, Abraham's wife, to have a son in their old age, who they named Isaac, and whose name means he laughs, because it was hard for them to believe at first that they could even have a child in their old age, in that Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90 years old at the time. That's recorded in Genesis chapter 17, verse 17. So that even though they laughed about it in the beginning, they believed God, and later it came to pass. But then, in what might seem to have been an illogical twist to this story, and an apparent contradiction to God's promise, which again involved blessing all the families of the earth through Isaac, according to Genesis chapter 22, Abraham's faith was tested, and that in this chapter, God told him to go and to sacrifice his son Isaac, which was his only son in the sense that of Abraham's offspring, only Isaac was to be his sole heir concerning God's promise, in that through his bloodline, God would bless all the families of the earth. But in what at first glance seemed like an apparent end to this promise, God tested Abraham by allowing him to sacrifice his son Isaac on an altar, on a mountain, in a region called Moriah, which according to 2 Chronicles chapter 3:1 was most likely the mountain where Solomon's temple was built, which is an interesting side fact. But in continuing with Genesis chapter 22, we are told there that Abraham obeyed God through faith, and in obedience to God's command, he bound his son Isaac. He placed him on wood on an altar with the fire ready, and then he raised a knife to sacrifice him. But as Abraham raised the knife in order to sacrifice his son, we are then told that an angel of God called out to him and told him not to lay a hand on him. But instead, what God did, he provided a ram, which was a male lamb. It was caught in a thicket consisting of perhaps small trees and perhaps some thorns around there as well. But in any event, God provided this ram, this male lamb, to be the offering in the place of Isaac. And so that's it. There we have the story of Abraham and Isaac. But in further looking at the scriptures, we can see that there's a deeper spiritual meaning to this story as well, in that this story symbolizes what Jesus would later come to establish in fulfillment to God's promise to Abraham, which he would accomplish through the sacrifice of Jesus for us on a wooden cross. And according to some scholars, on the mountain in Jerusalem, which was called Mount Moriah. so that anyone, whether Jew or Gentile, could become a child of God through faith. In that, according to scriptures such as John chapter 1 verse 29 and 1 Peter chapter 1 verse 19 and other scriptures as well, Jesus is identified as the lamb, or actually the male lamb or ram, who would be God's sacrifice. For what? For the sins of the world. So that Jesus was like the ram caught in the thicket, in that he was the only one who could be and had to be God's sacrifice in order to fulfill God's promise. So that Jesus, in a spiritual sense, was caught up, or he was bound, in a sense, by God's promise to fulfill this purpose. So that according to scriptures such as Romans chapter 9 and verses 6 through 9, and Galatians chapter 4, verse 28, and other scriptures as well, as a result of Jesus' one atoning sacrifice, through faith in him, whether Jew or Gentile, when we put our faith in him and live by faith, we become what? We become the spiritual children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob, who, as an important side note, was later named Israel, whose name means what? It means one who struggles with God and has overcome. So that through our faith in Jesus, we inherit the promise made to Abraham and become a part of a spiritual nation. And we're also blessed in that we become the children of promise as well as the children of God. So that our struggle with God because of sin is overcome, which is, again, what the name Israel means. And that's all there is to it. But it's something from the Old Testament with a very deep spiritual meaning to think about as believers, to think about as Christians. Because this story was a type of Old Testament symbolism that was fulfilled through Jesus. So that this story serves not only as an interesting teaching of Scripture, a Scripture teaching that I call a Bible bite, but it also serves as evidence for our faith in Jesus as well. Well, in any event, with all this said, with all this in mind, I'll leave you with this thought, and I'll just go ahead and end this Bible Bite for today. So, with this in mind, till next time, God bless.